The 22nd entry in our continuing series of the best movie you've never seen is 1999's Stir of Echoes.
Do me. Can we go home? I feel kind of strange.
What are you doing?
I'm supposed to dig. And this is the most important thing that I have ever done in my whole life, in my whole stupid life.
And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Friday morning here with me in New York. Once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. The 22nd entry in our ongoing series of the best movie you've never seen. Today's film is fairly well remembered by history. It bombed at the box office. It has its defenders, mostly Gen Xers and some elder millennials. But as a film that's now more than a quarter century old, it doesn't really have the name recognition. Even horror film fans, if you're under 35, it's very unlikely that you've seen this film. As much as it's been readily available on streaming, it's possible that if you click on a certain horror film, films you might like, one of those. But I don't think this movie is nearly as well seen as it should be. The film in question is David Koepp's 1999 adaptation of Richard Matheson's fantastic novel, A Stir of Echoes. And the film version, they took off the word The film is just Stir of Echoes. And the movie stars Kevin Bacon in really what I think is one of his best performances as an ordinary telephone lineman when such a job was still a pretty big deal before everything was wireless, broadband, cell towers. People have cell phones in the world of this film, but a lot of people still have landlines. He plays an ordinary guy who appears to have some kind of extrasensory capacity buried deep within his consciousness. And his son also appears to have some kind of extrasensory capacity that has yet to be tapped into. In the world of this movie, all is well, although Tom Witzke is a bit maybe disaffected that he thought he was meant for more than to just be a dutiful husband. I think Catherine Irby is the name of the actress who plays his wife, but a dutiful husband, a good father, family man. They have a nice circle of friends. And two very interesting actors who appeared in a lot of movies during the 90s. Illeana Douglas, who is, I think that she's Melvyn Douglas's granddaughter. I know that Illeana Douglas is connected to she's not quite the Drew Barrymore level of being connected as far as from the family perspective, but she is, let me just double check on that. But another actor who was terrific in so many movies in the 90s, Kevin Dunn. Kevin Dunn, who was so good in Ivan Reitman's Dave as one of the White House kind of chiefs of staff working with Frank Langella's character. And it's not the sort of role where you would expect a secondary or even tertiary character to have a well-earned arc. But Kevin Dunn is so good in that role that he sells it. And he's really good in Stir of Echoes. So I'm looking up Illeana Douglas, who plays a critical, yeah, I actually got that right. Screen daughter of Melvyn Douglas. Right? I don't know, I just had that in my head. Hold on a sec. I got to plug this in. I just had that in my head. And in this instance, I was correct. So they're having a big block party kind of thing early in this movie. And Illeana Douglas is a friend of the two principal characters, Kevin Bacon's character of Tom and his wife. And she puts him under. she hypnotizes him, and he sees what appears to be a murder being committed. And then he wakes up, and he starts having these terrifying visions. Are they real? Are they buried memories? Does he have ESP of some kind? What the fuck is going on here? And the movie deliberately gives us a sense of unease and feelings of displacement and an gnawing sense that something terrible has already happened. And what can we do about it? Bacon is great. He sells the character so beautifully. You feel his fear, his pain, his anguish as to what's happening to him, what may have already happened in their decent neighborhood, as the Kevin Dunn character points out a few times. This is a decent neighborhood. And then the film goes from there. Now, there are certain movies that simply come out at the wrong time. And I would argue that Stir of Echoes, because it was released just after The Sixth Sense, if you do a 50-word synopsis of the plot of Stir of Echoes and the plot of The Sixth Sense, they're not that far apart. Although if you actually watch the two movies, they are miles and miles apart, thematically, conceptually, but they have certain elements in common that can't be ignored. And The Sixth Sense got phenomenal critical reviews, and as I would assume most of you know if you're even this far into this episode, was a runaway box office hit and took in not only a ton of money, but got a slew of Oscar nominations, including Best Picture and Best Director from M. Night Shyamalan. Not the sort of movie that would get those kinds of accolades. It shows how much of an impression The Sixth Sense made. The Sixth Sense is a movie that I like, but I feel like it was a little bit overrated looking back 25 years. Stir of Echoes is a movie that needs to be seen in greater numbers, and it did disappoint at the box office. The budget was, probably 20 million, maybe even a little bit more. It only took in 23. And before I forget, it is streaming free on Amazon Prime and Tubi and a couple of other platforms. But if you just have a general Amazon subscription, you can see this film for free and check my work. Do I know what I'm talking about, or is this movie a piece of shit? I've seen it 5 times, and each time, the craziness of the narrative, some of the jump scares, and the strength of Bacon's performance. The fact that Catherine Irby, as Maggie, that's the name of the wife, I forgot, she's so grounded because there are fantastical things happening, but she keeps bringing it back to surface level as far as this is a real woman in a real marriage with a real guy who appears to be losing his mind. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. Now, the author of the book, Richard Matheson, was, or probably still is to this day, Stephen King's favorite author. He saw Richard Matheson as a master of the form as far as writing good horror. And there are so many different ways to write horror. And when we conceptualize what does horror mean to you versus you, Stir of Echoes is not, it does not follow the tenets that I've discussed on the channel. It is not a complex discovery plot kind of story where there is some kind of other, some monstrous presence committing terrible acts. This is not that movie, and neither was The Sixth Sense for that matter. But this is a horror film in the same way that The Shining, and the same way that The Sixth Sense, I feel like this is even more of a horror film than The Sixth Sense. The Sixth Sense to me is more thriller, suspense with mystery elements, as this film has the mystery elements. But there are more horror film jump scare type moments in this than in The Sixth Sense. But that's neither here nor there. Stephen King, Clive Barker, when we think of writers of horror who have come on the scene in the last 5 decades, those are 2 of the names. Dean Koontz, another one, although Koontz has seemingly moved away from horror, writes more kind of conventional mystery novels these days. But what Stephen King said, he adored Richard Matheson. It was actually, he recommended in one of his earlier works, nonfiction works, he recommended that horror fans read at least one book by Richard Christian Matheson. Excuse me, I keep saying Richard Christian Matheson, that's the son. But by Richard Matheson, and he recommended Stir of Echoes. He said, it's lean, it's clean, you'll be able to probably finish it in 3 to 4 hours, and you'll get an idea of why I'm such a fan of this guy. His prose style is so clean. I tried to take inspiration from that. I think he also wrote The Incredible Shrinking Man. I'm not sure if that was the title of the book. But another horror novelist, quote unquote, that King was an enormous fan of is Ira Levin. Ira Levin wrote the book Rosemary's Baby, which to this day, there are many would argue, is a top 10, if not top 5 all-time greatest horror film. Also, because while telling a fantastical story, there are real-world elements throughout. It might tell a crazy story of surrealism and pagan worship and Satan stuff. Is the devil real? But it keeps pulling us back, in the case of Rosemary's Baby, to the New York City of the late 1960s and real people living their actual lives that have no connection to any satanic cult or any kind of crazy shit where the devil may impregnate somebody. Satan is his father, not Guy. He rose from hell and begat a son of mortal woman. Hail, Satan. Thank you. I'll be here all week. Stir of Echoes is a terrific story. And the writer-director, David Koepp, who I was already a fan of, he did what, to me, is a really good adaptation of Jurassic Park. He's the guy who ended up writing that script. And Steven Spielberg, when he came on board and wanted to, he was going to make Jurassic Park, they went through a number of different iterations of the screenplay, because as much as, even at that point, mid-40s, meaning age, mid-40s, Steven Spielberg, he didn't have as much creative freedom as he would later have. He still had people he reported to, because DreamWorks hadn't occurred yet. They had not formed DreamWorks yet. He was still working through his original company, the fantastic Amblin Entertainment, but he still had people to report to. So he could not make exactly the movie that he would have wanted to, which, believe it or not, would have been even more spectacle. Because Michael Crichton's novel, there are a couple of, and you could visualize it, what would have been unbelievable large-scale action sequences featuring dinosaurs that they could not really achieve without the budget, even for the time, 250, 300 million. It just wasn't going to fly. So they needed to figure out, what can we do? And that Spielberg hired, her name, she went by Scotch Marmo. She wrote a draft of the script that Spielberg just didn't think worked. And David Koepp ended up turning in a draft that Spielberg felt kept everything they absolutely needed in Jurassic Park and got rid of the stuff that as much as Steven would have wanted it, we can't. This is going to be prohibitive. This one scene might cost us 30 million. We can't risk it. Can't risk it. Because what if we can't get the effects to work right? All of these things that the average film fan would never worry about, Spielberg was beating himself up over, and knowing that he was turning from that to shoot Schindler's List. Like, just, he was under enormous strain. It's lucky that he came through as well as he did, because Jurassic was an enormous hit, and Schindler's List got all of the acclaim and the accolades, and deservedly so. But David Koepp, the idea here is that he knew how to do an effective adaptation. And the art of adaptation is something that writers can identify with. If you ever, and I understand not that many people will have done this, but if you have experience, as I do, unfortunately never got produced, but experience of taking a book that is loved by a producer, a potential filmmaker, and they say, you need to turn this book into, let's call it a 110-page screenplay. How do you do it? Some people find it more difficult than others. But in the case of David Koepp, having read Stir of Echoes, or A Stir of Echoes, and seen the movie, he was able to keep everything that made the novel really interesting. He actually amped up the horror elements. To me, A Stir of Echoes, Matheson's novel, does not read like horror. It reads like a suspense story with supernatural elements, not horror. It's ironic that Koepp presumably amped up the horror as far as the construction of the film, because it would probably translate to bigger box office. And the bigger box office, it just didn't happen. And I mean, this is kind of a ridiculous personal story, but I remember I saw Stir of Echoes in theaters the weekend it opened, and I immediately preferred it to The Sixth Sense. I love the fact that M. Night Shyamalan's career blew up. I thought that was fantastic because I already had heard of him from some of his earlier work. And I worked with a literary agent and a producer who unfortunately passed in 2002. But this guy that I was still actively working with at that time, he got distribution for M. Night Shyamalan's first film, which was called Praying with Anger. So I kind of felt like I was part of the club, as dumb as that might sound. And so even though I didn't unabashedly love The Sixth Sense, I liked it. I'd give it between 3 and 3.5 out of 4. But Stir of Echoes to me was a clear 3.5-star movie. It was not 3 to 3.5. I thought the film was almost perfect for what it set out to achieve and what it did achieve. So I saw it, and Bev's Gym, right? I went in, and just as normal conversation that we would have with people while working out, while on cardio, I talked this movie up to everyone. And I even added the qualifier, if you liked The Sixth Sense, you will love Stir of Echoes. I sounded like a fucking commercial. Sorry to all those who I polluted. Apologies, 25 years hence. But I have one specific memory where two people, I talked the movie up, independent of one another, saw the film. One of them liked it, not as much as The Sixth Sense. The other one said they were bored to tears. What movie did you watch, Jer? This movie sucked. Sorry. This is all subjective after all, right? So there are elements in the film. There are these moments, the sense of displacement, the feeling, the surrealist nature of some of the kind of dream sequences. There's some really great imagery. And you can tell that David Koepp, as the filmmaker in this instance, he really wanted to achieve a certain look, an almost film noir type style that he puts forth in this film. And sometimes you just have a home run hitter in the lead. And Kevin Bacon, there are very few actors who could have pulled this role off believably. But he makes us care about the character right from the jump. So when he starts doing these antisocial, seemingly bonkers, he starts taking these crazy actions, we continue to sympathize with him and empathize with him because we got enough early to know this is a good man at heart. This is a guy who loves his wife, who loves his son, and he is experiencing things that are unexplainable. And I remember in the preview trailer, there was one line in the movie that was emphasized in the trailer because the trailer gives almost everything away, but it doesn't really, if you haven't seen the film, because you don't know the images of what you're seeing. But if you know the kind of twists of the story and you watch the full theatrical trailer, you might actually laugh and you'll say, they literally give it away in the first 20 seconds. But there's also the idea of not wanting to know. Because we always think we want to know. But sometimes, maybe it's best if I don't know everything. And so, in the world of the film, Tom suddenly has second sight, suddenly is seeing these terrifying visions, which don't really seem to add up to very much, and he wants it to stop. He's not looking to solve a potential murder, if in fact that's what's going on. He wants the voices in his head to shut the fuck up, in other words. He wants the visions in his head, no thank you, I'm all set here. And the line that was repeated in the trailer is him addressing the Illeana Douglas character, who was just having fun. She wasn't trying to cause any problems. Whatever door you opened in my brain, I want you to shut it. That got me into the theater. That's pretty fucking scary. I don't think that I would want to know. I think I'm okay. Blissfully unaware of the treachery that may or may not be going on down the block, or that may or may not have happened in my basement before I moved in. Quiet the voices. I don't want to listen anymore. I don't want to see anymore. I'm good. Being a lineman, I should have been more grateful because I had a steady job with good benefits, a wife who adored me, and a wonderful son. Really shouldn't be complaining so loudly, should I? I really shouldn't act like my life is a failure when by most metrics, it's really not. Almost like he has delusions of grandeur. All of the supporting performers are great in this film. Everyone really brings their A game. Nobody takes the movie off. Nobody is winking at the audience. You have these really creepy, spooky, ooky moments throughout. And as I said, a lot of jump scares. If you're somebody who's into jump scares, this is a movie for you for sure. And if you're not, then maybe not. But even with the jump scares, there is the progression and there is the sense of slow building dread. This is a more meditative horror. This is not an in-your-face, it's not a slasher film. No. It's not that kind of movie. This is not Freddy or Jason or Candyman. This is real-world terror with an apparent supernatural component. And I highly recommend, if you're into the genre, if you like suspense, if you're into thrillers, if you love horror, and you like horror that has the supernatural component without a masked slasher at the center, it makes it more terrifying because it feels real. This story not only could happen, this story does happen. It's the presentation, it's the art, it's the skill of the performances and of David Koepp's direction and his very tight adaptation of Richard Matheson's very, very strong novel. Stir of Echoes, the 22nd entry in our continuing series of the best movie you've never seen. This has been episode 293 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Friday morning with me here in New York. If you checked out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or any of the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.